Hey guys, this is Omer from MMOs.com. We'll do another quick weekly news recap of all major MMO news and announcements for the week ending January 11th, 2016. This is episode number 25 of the recap, and the first bit of news this week comes from X-Legend, our favorite Taiwanese developer of gorgeous anime-inspired MMORPGs, such as Aura Kingdom and Eden Eternal, for example. X-Legend announced a brand new MMORPG this week called LaPlace, which sort of reminds me of Lattale, at least the name, with the La and all. And visually speaking, this game takes a different approach than other X-Legend titles. This is their first game that's an isometric camera angle, similar to games like Divillion and Elite Lord of Alliance. The game also aims to have a stronger emphasis on storytelling than other X-Legend titles, which isn't really a big pro for a lot of people, because, I mean, a lot of people don't read the story in a lot of MMOs anyway. And for those that don't know, X-Legend also develops Aura Kingdom, Eden Eternal, Dragon Hunter, and a bunch of other games, which are all actually published by Area Games. And I suspect this new game will also be by Area. All their games tend to feature really crisp anime-inspired visuals, and LaPlace is no exception. Just take a look at the visuals right now in the background. Unfortunately, there is no release date yet for LaPlace. In fact, there's no announcement for the game outside of Taiwan just yet. This is just because it comes out in Taiwan first, always, because it is a Taiwanese developed game. But I suspect Area, again, will end up licensing it because they have all the X-Legend stuff. Boosh, they even have a pretty cool logo. Next up, some news on another upcoming game, this time HeroWarz. They released a new trailer for the game, and as well as releasing some additional information for their updated teaser site to profile each of the game's 15 playable heroes. They're not classes, they're rather characters, so 15 playable characters, similar to Elsword. The game is slated for release this quarter, which means it should be out by the end of March, and is coming from COG Games, the company behind Elsword. That's really what they're best known for. They also did a Grand Chase, but rest in pieces Grand Chase. The game shut down a little while ago. And the video you're seeing in the background is the game's prologue trailer, which is the new one they released this week. Unfortunately, there's no actual gameplay here, but if you want to see an actual gameplay trailer, there is a gameplay trailer out there. Just search HeroWarz gameplay and you'll find it. But I guess it's trying to show off the game's story for those interested in MMO stories. Up next, some news for console MMO gamers out there. Neverwinter Underdark is launching on February 9th. I've said this before and I'll say it again. I find it a bit odd that the console version of the game is always a few months behind the PC version. On the positive side, lead designer of Neverwinter, Scott Sheoff, said in an interview that we did with him a couple of months ago, or last month rather, that they're working on a release parity between console and PC versions, so the delay between platforms should shorten in the future. And despite what some may think, the Xbox version of the game is actually off to a pretty decent start, as it reached over 2.1 million users within a few short months after release, though it's been quite a while now. I expect it did well because it was one of the first free-to-play console MMORPGs out there. But yeah, Underdark is coming on February 9th, basically. Next up, we have some tech-related news, which is somewhat relevant to MMO gamers out there. The Oculus Rift began pre-orders this week. Virtual reality is finally almost here. At a bit of a steep price, unfortunately, though. So pre-orders began this week with a March 28th shipping date, but with overwhelming demand, things quickly got pushed back. So if you're one of the first people to pre-order, you should get your Rift, or rather shipped to you on March, or late March, but everyone else will have to wait a little bit longer, much longer in fact for most of us. I actually pre-ordered my copy, and my copy is coming on in May. So that's actually months after the original ship date. The game in the video in the background is Valkyrie, one of the Oculus launch titles, but I'm actually more excited about what kind of MMOs will be available in the coming years. Wizard Online is one such MMORPG. It's a fully VR MMORPG. It's currently in the works, but I think it's a pretty indie title because there's not that much information out there. But I mean, why they named it Wizard Online, I don't know. It just screams generic to me. But I'm sure with this technology evolving, there's a lot of VR MMOs already in development. I mean, obviously the Sword Art Online dream is still far away, but I mean, it's slowly becoming in reach now that the technology is just coming out, even if it's really, really basic. But I mean, in 10 to 20 years, you know, we can always hope. Next up, some early access news from Divergence Online. The game officially launched on Steam through the early access program this week and is supposed to be Star Wars Galaxies 2.0, which seems odd because there are already numerous Star Wars Galaxies emulation projects currently in the works. Divergence Online has a bit of a checkered history, as it originally appeared on Kickstarter years ago and hasn't made much progress until just recently. It's an open-world sandbox MMO, but despite mostly positive reviews on Steam so far, there are a lot of critical reviews out there. I think this one is a wait and see, especially since the early access price is about $40. I mean, it's just weird that they made this game to begin with. I guess the original Kickstarter program was ambitious and interesting, but now again, there are already emulation projects in the works, so it seems kind of odd to be, Star Wars Galaxies 2.0, but we'll see how things pan out. Up next, we have some news for old school RuneScape. The new year brings a major new update for one of the internet's oldest and longest running MMORPGs. Certainly not the oldest, but it's up there somewhere. The first section of entirely new content in Zia has opened up. This is the first phase of a 3-phase launch, and it features the city of the Great Quran, where players choose from one of 5 factions in a fight for dominance across the metropolis. Basically a faction wars of sorts. The rest of the 3 phases are expected to launch throughout the year, and despite the game's age, it's still doing quite well. The RuneScape Classic, though, is definitely a bit dated now, but it still does have some hardcore fans. It's definitely cool to see that Jagex has not abandoned it either. And boosh, next up, interesting news from Black Desert Online. The folks at Dom Games are taking player input to heart as they moved to remove energy potions from the game's cash shop. Energy is Black Desert's controlling mechanism for the game's crafting and processing system, so it artificially limits how much stuff can be produced by players in game. So prior, players could spend money in the cash shop to get rid of this barrier or kind of reset their energy limits so they can keep crafting, but players view this as a cash grab by Dom, and because of player complaints, they actually removed the item from the cash shop. However, the energy system is still in game, so they're trying to work around it in a different way, but they won't be selling a way to get around it through the cash shop, so they're removing that almost pay-to-win mechanic. So it's cool to see them actually taking player input into account, which is nice. Though it is definitely odd to see them even try selling these in the first place, because the game is going to be buy-to-play in Western markets. So given that it's a buy-to-play game, I think it was kind of scummy to kind of sneak this in to begin with. It's cool that they removed it, but it never should have been in the buy-to-play version. I mean, if you want to make it free-to-play, this is almost acceptable. In a buy-to-play game, though, I don't think it makes any sense. But that's just my opinion. Up next, a bit of news from Star Wars The Old Republic. The game's Knights of the Fallen Empire's 10th chapter is almost upon us. It's the latest update for the game, which is set to launch on February 11th. And given how story-driven Star Wars The Old Republic has always been, expect a lot of new content updates and a lot of story-driven missions in Chapter 10. And do keep in mind, even though Star Wars The Old Republic went free-to-play, it's one of those games that you can play the entire game for free. However, if you're serious about the game, you do have to subscribe for a lot of the game's core features. But I mean, it's kind of like Guild Wars 2 in a way, because it is free-to-play, the content and the leveling is free-to-play. But again, for serious players, you do have to end up spending some money. Next up, some more retro MMO news, but not nearly as retro as the RuneScape news we covered earlier. Conquer Online this week released its latest expansion called Awakening of the Monk, which, as you probably guessed, tweaked the Monk class in the game. That adds a new epic weapon as well as 3 new epic skills for the Monk class. And despite the game's subpar visuals, Conquer Online remains extremely popular worldwide. Previously, TQ Digital, the company behind this game, had almost a dozen games, or half a dozen games under publishment, but all those games kind of shut down, and all they're kind of left with is Conquer Online. I think EU Demon's still around too. The game has a heavy emphasis on PvP and is available on both PC as well as mobile. It's one of those games, though, that won't appeal to newer players, so if you haven't played in the past, odds are you won't be that into it, but it's still kicking, it's still doing alright. Next up, we got some interesting news from Granado Espada. It's an older fantasy MMORPG from T3 Fun, and the news is that it hit Steam just this week. It's not exactly a new game, but it's been available through Red Banda's T3 Fun portal, but again, it just relaunched on Steam, or rather moved to Steam, so now it's easily accessible by everyone. No major update with the Steam version, it's just the same game accessible through Steam. The game's unique selling point is probably its multi-character control system, which kind of makes it unique, so I'll give it props for that. If you don't want to play Granado Espada or don't really care about it, do check out the game's soundtrack. We have it on MMOs.com. It is one of the best soundtracks amongst MMOs. It's really top-notch stuff. Made by the same guys that did Tree of Savior as well as Ragnarok Online. This is the soundtrack. Anyway guys, that is Granado Espada. The next and last bit of news this week is about an MMORPG that launched not exactly last week, but a bit earlier. Titan Siege from Gamesco entered open beta recently, and the only reason I didn't include it in the previous weekly recap was because of how low profile the game's launch was. They sort of transitioned into open beta without telling anybody, so I didn't hear about it until just recently. I already did a first look for the game, and it's pretty solidly generic, but even so, it's not terrible. It's odd to see a game released now, though, as it was originally revealed back in South Korea in 2012, so it's supposed to be a PvP-heavy MMORPG that reminds you of Sphere 3 in a way, because it's Sphere 3 Enchanted World, that is. So it's a bit of an older game, and it is PvP-driven, but it is very generic. But if PvP is your thing, and you just want to try out a random new game, it may be worth checking out. But do keep in mind, it is not fully translated yet, and still has quite a few glitches. But anyway guys, that's it for MMO News for the week ending January 11th, 2016. I'll see you guys tomorrow for the podcast. Later guys.